Hello everyone, I am Aurora CDUVA, the VTuber so small you could mistake it for an ant. Oh shit, that's already take! Bug-type Pokémon were an incredibly niche topic once. An entire type of Pokémon that were for the majority of the part completely ignored and tossed aside by players at the first occasion. And now, they're a dedicated type to look up for. How did the weakest type in Pokémon's history begin a turn for one of the most beloved? And why do I love them so much that I consider playing Pokémon Champions only to see how far I can go with a dedicated bug-type team? Well, before we go and see how things went good for them, we need to establish why they had a rough start in the first place. Why were they at 0 before arriving to Hero? When I say something like insect, what comes to your mind? Maybe an insult to describe someone as insignificant, or maybe a frail creature that you need to handle with care so you do not accidentally squash it. Or maybe it reminds you of that one fucking mosquito during summer that hides in the day and then persecutes you during the night while you try to sleep because that worthless piece of shit. Regardless of what it makes you think, we can agree that usually these creatures are thought to be a negative concept. Sure, once you analyze said creatures, you realize that they are a fundamental block that makes life possible, since they work on a level that we bigger creatures usually do not. But no matter how vital a function is, people will snob it regardless if they deem it icky. And this perception carries on in the Pokémon world. Bug-type Pokémon are usually one of the first Pokémon types you can encounter in a Pokémon playthrough, and they are usually some of the quickest to fully evolve in the early game. Just to make you understand how quick we are talking, if a starter Pokémon usually reaches its first evolution between level 15 to 17, early bug types usually are fully evolved by those levels. So much so that you could even have a fully evolved Pokémon ready to go against the first gym of most of the early Pokémon games, even with level caps in place. But that spike of power is just a temporary feel-good moment. Because as a trade-off, those same fully evolved bug Pokémon pale in comparison to the majority of the fully evolved Pokémon you can capture and use in the rest of the game. Even base Pokémon with no evolution sometimes. Nothing stops you from using them on your team. But it's a downright challenge, where there's so many things that work against them. Of course, there are decently powered bug Pokémon that make the exception in this regard, and these bugs are actually pretty decent stat-wise, but these were rarely, if ever, used at all. That's because these Pokémon are usually pretty rare to encounter, or a late game encounter when usually most players already have a full party decided for a reason or another. But I think the worst offender of this is actually one of the best bug-type Pokémon ever created, Scizor. This Pokémon not only makes use of its steel bug typing to have only one weakness, but it also has a pretty mean physical bulk and a great attack power. Yeah, sure, it's slow and whatnot, but do you really need to outspeed if you can tank the hit and dish it back? Unfortunately, this incredible Pokémon has a major weakness, one that prevented me from enjoying it for the longest time. It's locked behind a trade evolution. And since I never had friends in general, let alone friends that played Pokémon growing up, I actually downright disliked Pokémon like Scizor or Alakazam or Golem, since they were basically unavailable to me without cheats. And if I'm using cheats, I might as well be using a full team of legendary Pokémon, don't you think? Sure, in Pokémon Fun games, Scizor and many other Pokémons were made more available without trading, But we're not even talking about official Pokémon games anymore. And do you understand what I'm saying? Obtaining Scizor is so difficult that you're more likely to encounter it in unofficial fan media or side games rather than the mainline games. A friend of mine couldn't even obtain one for Pokémon ZA without trading with strangers, since when he was playing it, I was still debating whenever to buy it or not, and he is the biggest Scizor fan I know. So, Bug type were either not powerful enough to make it to a full playthrough or rare enough not to be worth it, resulting in an unutilized type reserved only for challenge runs dedicated to them and whatnot. And since in those years Poketubers were still not a thing, they were even more doomed to irrelevancy. So, what happened to make the bug type from the most scorned and disregarded type to one that has an entire month dedicated to it? Do you understand what kind of PR work that the bug type Pokemon went through in the 5th gen? Because that rippled throughout the franchise to this day. Unova, or Unima in Italian, made over 150 new Pokémon, in an effort to renovate the roster of available Pokémon and spice things up for a new player base, since the previous one was moving away from Pokémon games. Instead of following the previous game design philosophy, Pokémon introduced new bug Pokémon that were incredible. Galvantura is both cute and cool looking, other than being a fast special attacker. Scolipede, being a fast physical attacker and a gigantic and fierce looking Pokémon, a Selco and a Scavalier unfortunately had the trade evolution burden like Scizor, so even if they're cool, I still do not care for them. Livani was a really elegant Pokémon and worth considering. They released a bug I legitimately forgot Crusher existed, and not only they released a bug pseudo-legendary that ended up being one of my favorite Pokemon ever, both for how it was presented in black and white and because it's one of the most powerful and fun to use bug Pokemon of all time, but also released the first official legendary bug Pokemon, Genesect.
Isn't Genesect a mythical Pokemon?
I will carve your soul like a pumpkin and use it as a toilet.
And this incredible legendary was an addition to the franchise never seen before, but unfortunately before Legend CA it was an event exclusive Pokemon, so outside of cheats not really available. So we went from weak or unavailable Pokemon to cool looking and competent Pokemon basically overnight. And this trend continued in the 7th gen with the introduction of Araquanid, Vikavolt, Ribombee, the Ultra Beasts, Buzzfall and Pheromosa, and since they were introduced with multiples and had different gameplay to normal legendaries, I have no problem addressing them as different than legendary Pokemon, and most importantly of them all, my boy Golisopod. This is the pinnacle of bug Pokemon types. But even though they were basically reinvented thanks to Unova, they were still just another Pokemon type like any other. For example, yeah sure, there are a lot of boring water types, but then there are a bunch that are incredibly cool, and the same goes for the fire types and whatnot. So why do I love bug type specifically? If you like the show, please like, comment and subscribe. A little bit of support goes a long way. Let me establish one little thing. I do not like bugs in real life. I hate having them on me. I freak out when a mosquito or something like that shows up out of nowhere in front of me, and if I lived in Australia, I would have probably died of an heart attack, considering the beasts that roam that Arceus forsaken land. No offense to Australians, by the way, I unironically love your accents. But Pokemon has managed to scale back the uncomfortable details of real-life bugs. in a way that makes them compelling to me instead. One big thing are the eyes. The normal bug eyes freak me out normally, but Pokemon managed to make them work. Sometimes directly making them cute. And another detail that works for them is when the Pokemon have an exoskeleton, now reinterpreted as a cool armor for battle-ready Pokemon. Do you have any idea what kind of miracle do you need to make me look at a spider and have a "aww" reaction? The only real-life spider that I will destroy you! The only real-life spider that ever pulled that off for me is the jumping spider. Bug Pokemon have this incredible take on the design of the normal insects that make them stand out compared to normal Pokemon, in a way that make them look either incredibly cute and adorable, or incredibly cool and ready to battle. And another way the design works, at least for me, it's how fragile this type can be. This is not a roster of Pokemon that just works without issue. You need to dedicate yourself to them and make them work, going out of your way to ensure they can survive against the various threats that challenge them at every turn. It's your job to make them the threats they always were meant to be. Thank you for watching the show. If you'd like to see more Pokemon content, I am streaming the various Pokemon games on Twitch. At the writing of this video, I'm currently on Pokemon Leaf Green, and I have a video where I cover the concept of Ace Pokemon, where Good Smash Golisopod appears in the discussion. Just one more question before we close things off. If you were to make a Dragon Bug Pokemon, how would you make it? Write it down in the comments. I am curious to see what the community can cook up. And with that said, see you on the next show.